You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody. Returning to Katahdin, an Appalachian Trail dream. Have you ever dreamt of hiking the AT? Bruce Matson did, so we're going to follow him every step of the way. Welcome back to Returning to Katahdin, an Appalachian Trail dream, sponsored by our friends at Trailtopia. Unusually, we're going to hear from Trailtopia straight away today because we're talking about the first meal of the day, and the finest meal of the day, in my opinion, breakfast. When I was hiking, I'd wake up to my alarm, deflate my AirPad, and contemplate my blah breakfast. Every morning I poured water into those different coloured paper bags, scrunched around the ingredients, not one of which had any association with fruit, and then eat that soulless gunk. I then find unhydrated powder and sugar in the crevices of the bag. Trailtopia's blueberry oatmeal is a bit of a novelty because it actually has real blueberries. Who'd have thunk? No gunk. It tastes great, the bag design ensures complete hydration, and it really sets you up for the day. Try Trailtopia Adventure Food, the best of home cooking away from home. Yep, the Brits go crazy for breakfast. Sunday eggs and bacon are the bomb. So now, let's get back to talking about Bruce. You may notice a slight difference in sound this week. I've moved to a different room to record and can tell the sound is a little altered. It still sounds fine though. Here's Bruce.
Good morning.
Good morning, Bruce. How are you?
I'm good.
Good. And now you're in Port Clinton, and this is what I wanted to remind you when it happened. How did you feel about the descent down into Port Clinton?
You had warned me about it, and when you look at the profile on the map, it looks like it's straight down, and it is very, very vertical. It's, you really have to be. We took it really slow just because the strain on your knees. Yeah. But the good news about it is it doesn't last that long. Some of these descents, like coming down Pearisburg or into Duncannon, were really steep, but they were longer. This one was probably a little steeper, but not quite as long. I think, probably 0.3, 0.4 was the total descent where it was really steep.
Yeah. Is those last few hundred yards, I think, that really you take a real sort of almost a straight dive down, don't you?
Yeah. They've got a rock staircase, which is, like you say, incredibly vertical, just a staircase straight down.
Now, and with all the rain you've had, have you found that some of these descents are quite dangerous now?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
You're getting a hell of a lot of mud on the trail, I suspect, as well. The other thing from last time I wanted to remind you about, coming out of Duncannon, that was when the rocks first hit me. That first bit up, you go across the Susquehanna River, past all the traffic, which I hated, all the noise of the traffic, and then you go back into the woods. That climb up there is pretty fierce, isn't it, in terms of rocks?
Yeah, I had the same experience. Very noisy. I was in the morning, so it was rush hour. A lot of trucks going by. It was crossing two rivers. It wasn't very pleasant because of the noise. Yeah. And like you say, it was a pretty steep climb up there. And then just as you get to the top of the ridge, there's a significant amount of rock scrambling and rock hopping. And, I thought we were being introduced to the rocks of Pennsylvania, and I guess we were. But fortunately, it didn't last that long. It was, it was a good 30 minutes, I think, along the ridge. And then it kind of eased away.
It's funny, actually. I wonder what the things you're going to remember from this year. Obviously, the cold, I suspect. That climb out of Duncannon was one of my real bad memories. Well, it was more of a. It was one of a sort of welcome to the rocks thing for me, and because obviously, like you, we've been expecting the rocks for some time. But this climb down from into Duncannon, you talk about the rocks there. I don't really recall those. That's really strange. Maybe they've rerouted it now, and maybe I didn't experience it then.
It wasn't really the rocks. I was just comparing the steepness of the descent
All right.
do the Port Clinton descent, and Port Clinton was steeper. Duncannon was pretty steep, and Duncannon was longer. I meant that the Port Clinton descent was just, fortunately, shorter than some of these steep descents like Pearisburg and Duncannon.
Right. So where are you staying? Where are you staying in Port Clinton, or because there's this communal area, isn't it, a tenting area?
Yeah, no, I had a great opportunity. A good friend from Richmond was coming up to Harrisburg and took me out to dinner last night. So I ended up staying in Hamburg. I think there's only one really place to stay here, which is the Microtel. So I'm in front of the Microtel this morning and hoping to figure out how to get a lift back to Port Clinton this morning.
Have you done much hitching so far?
No, I have not. It's something that has been discouraged in my family, so I've actually not done it at all.
Oh, right. Wow. Crikey. Now, I've got a question this week from a listener. It's a quite an interesting question, I thought. Samuel C. says he's had a question for you rattling around in the back of his brain for several weeks, and we'd love to hear your response. So Bruce has made mention several times of being a person of faith. And as a person of faith myself and an aspiring 2020 through hiker, I'm curious, has this journey helped shape or change Bruce's faith in God? And if so, in what ways?
That's a good question. I actually said to someone out here, we were talking about, questions of faith. And I said something like, if you are a person of faith, I don't know how you could spend the amount of time you spend out here in creation by yourself and not be influenced by that because of the longer periods of solitude and reflection. And for many people, the time thinking about God and faith and your faith is almost like a walking prayer of the time that you have. And so there's the internal reflection on your own faith and how you feel, protected by God out here. And, but there's also the opportunity every day to see the amazing creation and see God reflected in everywhere you walk, the mountains, the beautiful stream water, the spring coming alive, the amazing design that we see in nature every day. So I would say that it hasn't been a dramatic change. I think it all depends on where people are in their own faith journeys.
Yeah, of course.
I feel like I have a mature faith, but it is deepened and enlivened by the time, both internally alone as well as a reminder of the amazing creation that we live in. So I think people who are, still questioning or wondering, it's a different kind of faith walk, but equally as rich and maybe even more dramatic.
Interesting. I'm always interested to hear about what people of faith think about it. We interviewed on my show a guy a few weeks ago. He was called by God to go and do this, so that was an extraordinary thing. And as you know, I don't have that same faith, and I don't know whether envy is the word. I think I do actually envy people the way in which they think or the way in which they believe, and it's something I've never had myself. But I can certainly see it being strengthened by being out there, because let's face it, it's pretty darn beautiful out there, isn't it? Generally.
Yeah.
So
there's still time, Steve.
I'm 65. Unlikely now. So how about your week? How's your week been? What's been going on?
Really, really good. I was worried about missing spring because it seemed like we went right this summer. We had a hot week a week ago.
Yeah.
But this past week has been lovely. We've had 50-degree nights have been great for sleeping. We've had very little precipitation. Precipitation. Sorry.
I could cut that.
A lot of participation. And lovely days for hiking. And because there have been much more ridge running than climbing, even when it's 70 degrees, it's pretty pleasant on the trail. You might climb, as you know, the climbs here are nothing like we did in the South. So even if you have a climb, you might only be climbing for 30 minutes, and
Right.
you might break into a sweat, but you cool off pretty quickly. So the other thing that's been great about this week is, and I've been kind of anxious about the rocks and how I'm going to deal with the rocks, and
Sure.
I'm worried about my patience, my state of mind dealing with the incessant rocks. And here I am in Port Clinton, and I still haven't run across rocks, at least to the degree that I expected, that are ruining my day. I certainly have run across them, but they've been episodic, and you get through them in 10 minutes or 20 minutes, and then you're on to some beautiful, path, and actually, very little elevation change. So I keep waiting, and people tell me different things about, well, they're going to start here, they're going to start here, and we'll see. But I'm glad to have gotten this far through Pennsylvania without, horrendous experience with the rocks. And, we're actually making some progress through Pennsylvania. So I know they're coming. I've seen the photos, I've seen the videos, but reacting to your question of how hiking has gone, the absence of horrendous rocks have made the last few days quite enjoyable.
Wow, crikey. I must say, listening to you talk there, and I thought about this recently, your personal management of your hike is almost as if you personally intervene in your own psyche, if that makes any sense at all. You manage your own psyche on the trail, don't you? You know what should be coming, and you make those changes to your expectations. And I find that really interesting how you can do that. For me, everything was new because everything was a surprise. I mean, I read, but I didn't read that much about it. I didn't know what was coming up. And when it came up, it hit me. But with you, you're almost, managing, changing your expectations based upon what you see and what you're prepared for.
Yeah, Steve, I think that's a great observation. And I definitely am trying to do that, because I do think your mental state out here is critical, whether it's 4 days of rain or it's 5 days of rocks. And I think the key is knowing yourself, and everybody's different, but I think I know myself well enough to know that there are certain things that I'm not going to have a lot of patience for, and the frustration may get to me. So if I can manage my expectations in a way that don't make the day sort of a miserable, almost trip-ending experience, then I can get through it and get on to the next thing. So I think I am actually very much intentionally doing that, and I think it's very helpful to get through the tougher parts mentally. Physically, I feel strong, and climbing the climbs we have here and there are really not that difficult. I had a guest hiker out a couple of days ago, and we walked that very, very flat farmland section out of Boiling Springs. But there was one climb towards the end of the day, and she was rather shocked at how I, climbed it with her. And she realized, we got to the top, and she said, "You're not even out of breath, the least." And I think that's just 1,100 miles on your legs.
Yeah, I think we sort of take for granted how much physically we've changed. I'm sure your leg muscles are huge now. You've really built those up, and the ability to make them work for you. But funnily enough, having just made that observation about you, I hope I haven't just put the commentator's curse on you. The next time we speak, you're going to be effing and blinded or cursing about the rocks that you just couldn't handle, because you do lose it on the trail. Over 2,200 miles, as in real day, in everyday life, you have things that happen to you that you have to face, and the trail is very much like that. And I've found I draw so many life analogies out of the Appalachian Trail, don't you?
Oh, yeah, completely agree.
Yeah. So, where are you now, mile-wise? I know you said you're Port Clinton. I haven't got my book in front of me, unfortunately, at the moment.
Yeah.
How many miles have you done?
Yeah, it's kind of another milestone. It's 1,204 miles is Port Clinton.
Wow, 1,200 miles. Yeah, those milestones, those 100-mile milestones are pretty cool. I used to. There was a period of time around then I was doing about 100 miles a week. What are you getting through a week these days?
That's a good question. I've still averaged. I've had some good days. I've had some 18, 16, 17, 20-mile days. So I haven't had a zero. No, I did have a zero in Boiling Springs. So I'm probably still averaging in the 13, 14 miles a day when you consider a zero every 7 to 10 days.
Yeah. Is it starting to wear you down physically yet, or do you feel that you're because do you feel you're improving? I can recall around the 1,400 mile mark, my feet started getting a little bit swollen, and my legs I was getting tireder and tireder with about 700 miles to go. I think it was. I suppose that's 1,500 miles. Yeah, so I felt I was getting tired. Do you find, you sound like you find, you're getting stronger and stronger?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm getting stronger and stronger. Probably some. Certainly, I feel good about my ability to carry, myself up the hills. I've been very blessed with my feet and my knees are just perfect. They're not.
Amazing.
There's no blisters. There's no swollenness. And the fact that my knees after 1,200 miles don't have any pain at all is just a wonderful gift in many respects. So I feel very strong and healthy right now. I don't know what the next day is going to bring. I've got a good friend who's a couple of days ahead who told me that the rocks from Wind Gap to Delaware Water Gap were the worst, and his feet were just chopped up. But so far I am healthy, and I'm very thankful for that.
Yeah, I'm sorry I don't have the book in front of me, so I don't know because I normally like to say where you're going next. Now, have you done Lehigh Gap yet? The climb out of Lehigh Gap?
No. That is, I've got that. I actually have another guest hiker, good business partner friend, coming on Sunday. Uh-huh. And of course, the people who have hiked with me are generally, they just have to take the trail where it is, where I am.
You're not starting there, are you?
So this poor guy, I told him, I said, you are going to have a good workout because he's going to do the knife edge. He's going to do that section out of Palmerton where you have 17 miles without water. And he's going to climb out of Lehigh Gap in that zinc area where the
super fun
site. He's got a very challenging hike in front of him.
I tell you what, that was one of my most memorable climbs. I loved that. I couldn't believe how exciting it was. I remember the morning, it was sunny, warm. I'm climbing up. I was giggling out loud, laughing out loud to myself. I was by myself at the time. How exciting it was. It was like being a kid going up these boulders, and you look down and the road is miles behind you. Oh, you're going to love that. He is going to hate it, on the other hand. Absolutely hate it. Oh, dear.
It's going to be a challenge. He's a strong, strong guy. Works out all the time, but he doesn't have the type of miles on his feet. So it will be. It's going to be. I think it's going to be a real tough challenge. And on top of that, he actually told me that he doesn't really like heights. So it's going to be. He's going to have a badge of honor for his 3 days, like I feel like I did for surviving the winter in the Smokies.
Yeah, good for him. Good for him. Have you lost many other people? Not lost, you know what I mean. Have many other people quit, or do you feel that once you get to this area, this 100 miles, 1,000 miles, that those who were going to quit have quit already, or are many people just leaving the trail now?
Yeah, I think the former is correct. There's a lot of discussion out here that most people who get to the halfway point, they're going to finish unless there's a family tragedy, or injury, or an illness. And I think that's probably the general consensus of the hikers that I've been around, that people have gone this far are going to finish if there's not an unexpected event. I don't think they're going to quit because they're just fatigued from the day-to-day grind, the monotony, whatever you might have. So I haven't heard of anybody quitting recently, just out of monotony or frustration or whatever. I do think that people have gotten this far are likely to see it to the end.
And when do you next catch up with your family, with Cheryl?
Yeah, we've been working on that. Actually, Brooke has some time off, and Amy has some time off, and the dates are right around early July, end of June, and I've kind of worked out that I think I'll be at the sort of New York, Connecticut border by then. And my sister actually lives not too far from Kent. So the logistics is difficult. If we just had a shuttle driver to, could drive us all around, but we're trying to figure out a way for all of us to be together around New York, Connecticut, and also see my sister and her family. So that's sort of like the first of the July 4th weekends, and we're working that out. And Brooke is actually thrown out that she's available the week before that, and if I can figure out trailheads and all, she might come out for another couple of days of hiking, which was a fun surprise.
Yeah, I must say you've got a lovely little logistical lineup, haven't you? Quite a way up the trail, so must be really nice for you to have that. I would think doing this with zero support from home or anybody even interested in what you're doing must be pretty soul destroying sometimes. The fact that you can hop off the trail in Connecticut to see your sister, that's just so nice. I was lucky enough; I had friends up there, had places in Connecticut and in New Hampshire. And they were 300 miles apart, but it was just great to see them. Having spent a bit of time looking forward to the next time I'd be seeing them as well. And I think having that support from home and support from your friends, you've had friends come and, as you say, guest hikers, which is a great expression for it. I think that's been a wonderful thing for part of your trail as well.
Yeah, I agree. It really goes back to the management of your mental state. Yeah. I think with the time, the week I had off was great for refreshing. I think the 0 days that I take are valuable to manage my own self. Some people can go without them, I think. But for me, I do like to have that day off from time to time. Yeah. And to be able to visit with, your family members and friends from time to time. All of that gives you just a little boost of energy. Sort of to keep you going through the parts of the trail that might be frustrating or monotonous.
Yeah, cool. Well, I think I don't know where I saw it on one of the videos. There's a difference between boredom and monotony, and I think some of the trail is monotonous sometimes, but I don't think it's boring, if you know what I mean. And I think, there's a difference in my mind in those things anyway. There are things that you're doing the same thing again and again and again. But I never ever found the trail boring. Did you, or have you?
Yeah, I guess it's a little bit of what does is mean, but yeah, so I think you can sort of define those words very similarly or different. What I would say is you're not bored because you're very busy, and even when the trail has a sameness to it, you can't be bored because you're particularly. I think a good example is Pennsylvania. There is a monotony to the trail because it's relatively flat. The vegetation is very close to the trail. There's no views whatsoever, but maybe once a day. Yeah. And it's a lot of sameness. And that sameness makes it somewhat monotonous or boring, but you're not bored because you take your eye off the trail and you'll be flat on your face from tripping over a rock.
Yeah.
Yesterday was a good example. I hiked all day with a buddy, and we stayed together. He's quicker, but he decided to stick with me for some reason. We had a great conversation for 5 hours, and before we knew it, we had covered 12 miles, and it was kind of a perfect way to deal with what might be the sameness of the trail, because I haven't found Pennsylvania to be particularly interesting in terms of points of interest or topography or any geological formations. Even the views are limited, and it's not the most exciting hiking.
Yeah, but that's the trail providing again, isn't it? That's you had this conversation with somebody. Things happen like that. I love little stories like that because you had a really interesting conversation 5 hours with somebody, helped to pass the time. You didn't know why he stayed with you, but he did, and that's the trail providing once more. That's its own piece of trail magic, isn't it?
Yeah, I agree. So I've had sort of this pent up anxiety about Pennsylvania, and it hasn't proven to be that way yet. So again, in managing my mental state, I know the rocks are coming. And the one thing I really am excited about is that I've gotten this far with good experience. So
Yes.
I think that's going to help me get through the rocks. And I've actually reduced my mileage expecting the rocks so that I don't move through them too quickly, because that's where I think I'm most likely to get hurt.
Absolutely. Quite right. You're quite right too. Yes. It's one false move, you're done. Okay, mate. Well, lovely to catch up. And glad to hear you're continually heading north. And I'm looking forward to you doing Lehigh Gap. Well, actually, I'm even more looking forward to your friend doing Lehigh at the climb out of Palmerton. That's funny. All right, mate. Well, you have a good time, and I'll catch up with you soon, okay?
Okay, very good. Thanks, Steve.
Cheers then. Bye.
Cheers.
He's moving along, isn't he? When I checked the guidebook, I noticed how far he actually is into Rocksylvania, as it's known. My memory of it was far worse than his experience seems to be. As I said, he has been so smart in knowing what to expect and managing those expectations throughout the trail. Perhaps he was expecting misery on the rocks, and his attitude has allowed him to rationalise the misery. Whatever it is, he's going really well. We mentioned the climb out of Lehigh Gap, and he'll be doing that and the Knife's Edge with his buddy. I'm so looking forward to hearing how that goes. Now here's a nice 5-star review from iTunes. Brad Johnson in SFO says, the podcast is like going on a very long trip that you don't want to end. He actually ends with a question I've had quite often recently. Brad says that he'd like us to talk about what it costs to hike the trail. As I say, Brad, I've had the question in several forms recently, so perhaps I'll chat in general terms with Bruce about it next episode. In the meantime, Bruce and his buddy are heading for a date with Destiny in Pennsylvania. That is more than enough to look forward to. Bruce and I will see you next week.